Today we're going to cover the drawing basics, a first for this channel, where we have mostly covered sculpture so far. So let's get into it. We're going to be working with some basic materials here, but I'll list them anyways. I have pencils ranging from 2H to 2B. 2H is harder lead and leaves a lighter mark, while 2B is a softer lead and leaves a darker mark. And the brand I'm using here is Mitsubishi Hi-Uni, but it doesn't really matter too much. We're going to be drawing on Stonehenge paper from Legion, but any paper would do the trick. My setup here is a tabletop easel with a wooden board on it. The wooden board has the drawing paper taped to it. I suggest coming up with some sort of vertical surface or close to vertical surface to draw on. The reference I'm working from here is an image generated from a 3D model found in I made it rather, in the Head Study app, which is a cheap app available on Android and iOS, and a very good app for practicing the skull and the head. We're going to use a system of measurements today known as comparative measurements. This is probably the simplest and most versatile of any measuring system that you can find, which is why we'll use it. You don't need a fancy studio or a certain kind of setup to use comparative measurements. You just need something to compare one thing to another, which we can do within one object or one subject, of course. For example, here we can measure the overall width of the skull against the overall height. What's the relationship between these two measurements? The first marks on the paper are meant to give me a decent sense of height versus width. As a first measurement, I'd like to know how tall the skull is in relationship to its overall width. Without this knowledge, any chance of getting this right is going to be squandered, or at least made a lot more difficult. It's not that we need to measure more than we draw, not at all, but in the beginning it's going to be very useful to us to have a decent idea for what we're trying to draw. Some basic ideas of proportions, even before we begin drawing. We'd also like to know where halfway between the vertical and horizontal measurements are. This way we can know where this point is on our reference, and thus have a point of truth to measure things against in our drawing. Instead of working with only long distances, we now have a slightly shorter distance to work with as well, which is going to be very useful for us here. To begin with, we want to capture the big shape of the skull using simplified straight lines to do so. This means I'll be cutting through a lot of the information here in order to capture some of the more major angle breaks and landmarks. I'll find some heights within this shape as well, the brow ridge for example, and where the upper teeth meet the lower teeth. I draw lightly during this stage with my 2H pencil, as these marks are not meant to be my final marks. By drawing lightly and not pressing into the paper, we can easily erase these marks should we need to, and we will need to. In this stage, we're working under the assumption that we will be inaccurate and that there are fixes required to get us to where we'd like to go. Straight lines are an important part of this strategy and can't be underestimated. Where the straight lines meet, we are going to have angle breaks. One angle break can be measured against another angle break, and thus accuracy can be improved. Too many angle breaks in the beginning means the complexity is too high or too great, and the drawing will quickly fall apart because we can't manage so many small changes in the beginning. We need bigger and more sweeping changes now, and therefore a more simple drawing, with fewer straight lines, are going to be doing wonders for us. The center line is a feature here that you heard me talk about before in my sculpting videos, and I think it's equally important here as it is in sculpture. The center line bifurcates the head down the middle into two equal parts, meaning that it splits the head into two. The skull can be thought of as symmetrical when looking at it from the front, a symmetrical bony mass, and I suppose it is, with the exception of the jaw, which is of course hinged, so it's not part of the mass of the skull. In many cases, however, in most cases I would say, considering the entire thing as a bony mass works well in our favor, so that's what we are going to do here. This of course means that if the skull moves, the entire object moves, because it's one mass, and therefore everything has to move because it's linked together. Features like the brow ridge are sitting horizontally across the skull, 90 degrees to the center line, and since our center line is tilted, of course, that means the brow ridge is tilted here. This rings true no matter what pose the model takes. The same thing is true for every other feature as well. This means that we should have a center line, and once we find one feature on one side of the skull, we travel to the other side across our center line and find the same feature on the other side, horizontally across or 90 degrees across to the center line. In this way, we'll have a much greater chance at creating a skull that's structurally sound. Working without this knowledge, or simply ignoring this knowledge, which some people do, and it's often called working purely visually, can have a tendency to produce work that looks slightly broken, crooked, or sometimes like the head has been drawn in two different positions. We're of course working from a reference photo here, so we're a little bit less likely to have trouble with this issue since the image doesn't move. When working from life, however, this idea of structure and a center line becomes even more important, since a model can move and will move, and not all the marks we need to draw can be drawn at the same time, of course. You'll see me constantly reference this center line, especially in the beginning. This center line doesn't exactly follow the topography of the skull at this moment. It is a simplified version, just like everything else is simplified at the moment. But ideally, it will have the major landmarks we're currently working with placed correctly in vertical relation to each other, thus helping us position the skull in space. If the chin is further out than the brow ridge, for example, the skull is likely tilted back and we're looking up at it. We almost have the opposite taking place, of course. The chin is almost in line with the brow, or perhaps in line with the brow, and this indicates a skull that's tipped slightly forward. So we're looking slightly down at our skull here. The center line can help us navigate position, and it will help us line up the features so that we have a structurally sound drawing and thus a more convincing drawing. In order to control the pressure that's applied at the tip of the pencil, I almost never touch the drawing with the tip of the pencil without having some sort of support. I tend to use the edge of my hand or my pinky as a fulcrum, steadying my hand so that I can apply the exact right amount of pressure with the tip of the pencil to the drawing. Having your hand float above the drawing board is going to mean having a very hard time controlling this pressure and likely making many mistakes as a result. The angle breaks that my straight line create are going to be used for measuring and making sure we're getting the most out of these early line drawing stages. Any angle break has a relationship with some other angle break around it, and these are what I'm measuring, these relationships. Some of the off-time measuring and looking at the drawing have been edited out, so you're seeing mostly drawing here, but there are quite a bit of measuring and looking taking place as well. When measuring, it's nice to keep things simple, and lining things up or checking vertical and horizontal relationships are going to be much easier than, for example, measuring angles. By placing angle breaks properly vertically and horizontally, the angles that connect them should come naturally and without excessive effort. I'm a bit of a sucker, however, for measuring angles, so I probably do a bit more of that than I should. But I know that verticals and horizontals are more reliable and easier to work with, and now, so do you. Any angle break can be used here as a point to measure from. If you wanted to be obnoxiously precocious about this, you could measure every single angle break currently on your drawing before moving on to adding more. Usually I'm not going to be that careful, however, as I think the drawing should develop a bit more naturally and with your pencil and not so much with measuring all the time. Measuring too much can lead to some paralysis by analysis, so I think it's better to search with your pencil and measure when there is need to. I do measure quite a bit, but once it becomes part of your natural process, it won't feel so tedious and time-consuming, I'd say. Just because something is drawn on and adjusted a few times doesn't mean it's right either, and sometimes something that's added later exposes what came before it for not being right. I'm never going to measure so much that I think I have something nailed, because usually it doesn't quite work that way. You want to measure enough to make sure your drawing looks like your reference or subject, however. The more that starts to take place, the more we can begin to engage our eyes to do the measuring for us, and our eyes we've trained our entire lives to recognize very small differences. More complexity is slowly added over time. If not careful, we'll add too much complexity before the drawing is ready to receive it. However, there is no clear timetable for how fast more lines are supposed to be added to your drawing. It depends on what the drawing needs and what the drawing can take. As less and less juice can be squeezed out of any given step, more complexity should be added, and then more juice squeezed out of that until it runs dry. Whenever there is nothing to improve at any given point, you should add more lines and angle breaks to your drawing. You've seen the bottom edge of the eye socket, for example, go from 1 line to 3 lines throughout this video. But it started out as 1 line until the overall proportions, height versus width, of the eye socket was established properly. Only then are more lines added to make the drawing closer to the reference in terms of complexity. The idea of using straight lines is something that rubs many people the wrong way, and I can understand why. I've explained above why using straight lines help us so much in the beginning to keep things simple and make for a strong angle breaks, which are then easy to measure and compare to each other. There's also the more floaty reason for using straight lines, and I know that I'm in danger here of sounding like an astronaut high school art teacher, but let me explain. Straight lines have a tendency to create a stronger drawing, one that appears more solid and less wobbly. It certainly produces a certain look, at least if one sticks with the straight lines throughout the entire process. But it does have a tendency, I think, to produce drawings that look and feel more solid and strong, like they have integrity of their own. I guess it's a matter of intent, and since the intent here is to represent the natural world as best as we can, straight lines do a wonderful job at accomplishing that goal. You can also turn straight lines into more organic lines, which we will do at some part of this process. But even so, the solidity of those early stage straight lines, they have a tendency to linger in your drawing and still perform well. Of course, a skull works really well being made up of straight lines, since it's made up of hard bones anyway, so this works well in this scenario, but it can work, or does work I would say, for pretty much any subject. If representation is what you're after in your drawing, using straight lines is a good way, or a good strategy rather, to implement and employ.